Welcome to the second season of Operational Harmony, balancing business and mental well-being, where we achieve goals without sacrificing peace. Our host, Nikki, is the owner and founder of Nikki's Office, where she specializes in social media management, business audits, and business coaching. Her journey through mental health and entrepreneurship not only brings awareness, but also equips her with valuable coping skills. This unique experience offers a fresh perspective on approaching challenges and innovating in different ways. Let's introduce our guest.
My name is Nader Safina. I am the founder and principal of Black Ribbit. We are a culture branding agency. And what that means is that we help companies become people-first organizations who are inherently and cohesively answering the questions, why would anyone want to buy from us and why would anyone want to work for us? And we do that through a unique model that I created, which is designing the customer-facing brand and the employee-facing brand at the same time, and really giving both sides a reason to want to interact and engage with that organization.
Welcome.
Thank you.
How do you start the process? Like when you first get a new client, how does that start off and how do you build that? Because I've done I do digital marketing and stuff like that, but building that like front facing and employee facing thing seems more difficult than that.
Yeah, that's actually a good question. So normally, as you sort of alluded to right now, if you're talking about branding, marketing, sales, even leadership, they're primarily, if not exclusively, focused on the customer experience to the point where they almost neglect the employee experience. And then you have change management, HR, recruiting, coaches, and so on, focused on the employee experience. And these two sides almost never talk. So the gap that I identified a few years ago that really became apparent during and after COVID was this just canyon-sized gap between a company's culture and its branding. So essentially, the market is not getting what the market sees. And this is very apparent in the moment that someone applies for a job. The experience that they are expecting once they apply for a job is not what they actually get. What they read about the company's values and so on is not what they experience. And in fact, I have a question to pose you and everybody. When is the last time you read a job description and it actually spoke about your quality of life? When's the last time you read a job description that described how that job will impact your quality of life, as opposed to how you're going to impact the company and what your role is going to be and how you're going to help the company, but the other way around. So when you ask about the process, the first thing we do is just simply ask questions, just understand, how both sides of the organization perceive the brand in question, how they feel about it, how they interact with it, and how the experiences that they have with the organization make them feel as both a customer and or an employee and as a human.
My experience with job descriptions is you'll do this, and this, plus do anything else we want you to do.
Yeah, basically.
I don't particularly enjoy those kind of things.
Yeah, essentially, basically that's what it is. If they're talking about, often they'll throw in benefits at the end of the job description. There'll be like, if it's a full-time gig, for example, it'll be like, you'll get a 401k, you'll get such and such under the laws of whatever. This is an equal opportunities job, but it never talks about how it's going to actually impact your life. Can you picture yourself what your life is going to be like in 3 years if you take this job? And what's interesting is that the way that job descriptions are normally posed, as the applicant, we're so trained to not even notice it, but as the applicant, you're reading it as a project. You're like, ooh, yeah, this sounds like a really cool gig. And you're not even thinking about like what's going to happen after the 12th month or by the time 24 months has gone by. And they don't talk about career ladders. They don't talk about stepping stones. They don't talk about training. They don't talk about how your family is going to be impacted by it, how your personal life is going to be impacted by it. It never does that. And I find that fascinating. I find that very interesting. And I feel like you could screen a lot of not just applicants, but also position yourself in a way that's really putting people first. If you were to simply just adjust the language of your job descriptions would change a lot of perceptions about you as a company.
How do you get them to, so for me, getting a client to do it the way I want them to do it is sometimes like the old blacksmith ripping a tooth out of somebody's mouth because it's that difficult. Not because I'm bad at saying, hey, this is what we need to do, but it's the reluctance of somebody to change how they've always done it. So how do you handle those kind of moments where somebody's beating back, not because it's a bad idea or anything, but it's, I've always done it this way. This is the right way to do it type deal.
Yeah, that is usually the point of friction, is that people are definitely reluctant to change anyway, just inherently. Something this big can just feel so daunting and scary. It comes from the research. Honestly, the research is our greatest tool. Otherwise, everything is just an opinion, right? If you can't lean into the data is showing that, then it becomes a he said, she said thing. And everyone, then you can go, well, why would we change it? We've always been doing it in this way. And when the second someone says, why would we change it? You have an answer. You say, because we just did all this work and we did all this research. And not only it's one thing to say the market is showing this and trends are showing that and your competitors are doing this and everyone else in your category is doing it this way. Then the same response is actually still allowed. You can be like, well, we're not them and we've always done it like this, so why would we do it like that? And that's when the qualitative internal studies really become valuable, because you go, well, you as the leadership perceive your organization in this way and you think that it's working in a certain way, and yet that is not resonating with your entire staff, or at least like 90% of your staff or whatever. And you can say, we actually interviewed a sample of your staff, let's say 30 people, in addition to surveying the entire organization, where we got like 87% response rate. And on top of that, we did observational studies. We walked around your organization. We followed people around, we shadowed them, we saw how they were working, and so on and so on and so on. And then all that data compiled is a real reflection of what's actually going on. And that's the response you give. And at that point, then it's like, well, I'm not really telling you what to do here. I'm just showing you what the data suggests. Whether you act on it or not, at this point is up to you. And if you don't, well, I can tell you with great confidence that nothing's going to change. And the sort of contention that you're experiencing today is either going to get worse or continue to stay the same, but it's certainly not going to get better. I can guarantee you that. So that's the position that we take and that I take in that argument.
Okay, that makes sense. So kind of parallel to that, when you're, I don't know if it's parallel to that, but the whole hiring process. I personally haven't applied to a job in a very long time because I work for myself and I'm not filling out a job application because I don't want to. But you do hear about people trying to get hired and they're filling out all these
like forms and intake forms.
Forms and stuff. But also, so there's a couple of pain points that I've heard about in just from my side of things. So one of the pain points that I've heard about is that when applying, there's videos about this where it goes, please attach your CV. And then and then you hit next after you've done that. And it's like, okay, now fill in all your experience and
I know.
stuff. Like, I don't know, but the rage that fills me with just saying it, never mind actually having to do it. Like, I don't know how some people don't throw their computers out the window for having to do that a lot to try to get a job. So why do they do that? Is there a reason, or is it just because they want to be a pain in the neck?
So, man, that's such a good question. I think, so the reason from a technical standpoint is that there's a machine on the other side that's reading the applications. So it's looking for specific keywords and so on. And it's not sophisticated enough to digest an uploaded PDF, because a PDF could be written in various formats or saved out in different, and when I say formats, I mean like layouts and fonts and designs and things like that. So their intake system might not be sophisticated enough to handle that. Now, the reason that's stupid is because that current systems can digest a PDF in any format, in any sort of layout or anything. You upload, use ChatGPT or Claude as an example, you sort of into those systems, they can 98% of the time read it pretty damn accurately, regardless of how it's set up or anything. They actually know how to create the hierarchy of what's going on without header tags or any sort of labels on the back end. So in my experience and from what I understand, those systems are simply old. They're simply archaic and they haven't been updated. And that is something that needs to be addressed. It needs to be updated so that it creates a more efficient application system. Because you're right, I feel the same way. It enrages me when I upload it and then I go to the thing and it's asking me literally the same stuff. And now I have to type everything out or copy and paste it. And you're like, that's one. What if I'm applying to, like I did in 2021 to 460 jobs in 6 months and getting like no responses. I got one interview after which that job was no longer even available. And then I got like 26 rejections, which were all clearly from some sort of robot. And then, so what is that, 27 out of 460? So like 430, nothing, just no response. And making me feel like I was in some black void with no mirrors, making me feel totally insane. And you want to do that thing where you're uploading and typing and uploading and typing 400 times. I mean, that's insane. And then add to the fact that the application systems to which you're referring, they're putting like required, you don't even have a choice to skip them. You have to fill it out. And you don't know, like, is it necessary? Is it not necessary? I just uploaded my CV anyway. Why are you asking me again? So before anything even happens as an applicant, you're just like pissed off. You're like, do I even want to continue down this path? Is it even worth my time? Then you start looking at the job description again. You're like, is this worth my time? Should I just go to a LinkedIn profile with the easy apply attached to it and just do that instead? And then, that's when you start going down these routes of self-doubt and self-questioning. And you're like, is it worth it? Is it not worth it? Am I worth it? Am I not worth it? And so these points of friction and horrible design just create unnecessary stress in the applicant's sort of existence. And they go down these traps of self-doubt, which is just not cool, man. It's totally unnecessary. And it could be designed in such a more people-centered sort of way where you're not only concerned but empathetic for the applicant's experience and wanting to make sure that anyone who's going to be viable or suitable for this role is actually applying because you want that person to apply. Yeah.
The other stories I've heard are from interviews. So you've got the people who do interviews very, very well, and like you want to keep those people. Obviously, I'm not talking about them. Then you have the ones where the interviewer, person doing the interviewing, is late. They don't have the right paperwork that they need, or this company has set it up so you have to talk to 7 people before they can even remotely give you an answer. I don't know about you, but I don't have the time or the want to go interview 7 times with a company just to go, oh, we decided to go in another way. If you even get that.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of companies, like you just said, where even if you do the interview, they just ghost. They don't say, hey, we weren't able to get, you in a spot. You'll be kept in for another 6 months. If we have another thing, we'll contact you. None of that kind of information gets shared, but that used to be. So what needs to change there?
Yeah, that's a really valid point as well. And my response to that is actually goes down to the purpose behind the organization, the purpose behind the role, the purpose for the job itself. And because, look, if you can give a valid reason, a valid, useful reason as to why it takes 4 months, 6 months to hire somebody and why they have to go through 7 people, then maybe you can justify it. But if you're going to justify it and you're going to have a valid reason, then the interviewee needs to know what the hell is going on. And they need to expect that length of time. And they need to understand that's the only way that this job, not only is it going to be worth their time if they make it to the end, but that there's a reason that leadership and the organization requires it to be as such. And that role needs to fit those parameters. Because there are certain roles that absolutely do not need you to go through 7 people and 6 months of interviews and tests and questions and whatever, and for you to put your life on hold for half a year because this job is just so worth it. It just depends. It depends. There's no straight answer for that. And the reason that, like, what we do, why I do what I do, is to be able to give reason to those processes and to evaluate that process and to see if it's actually necessary for somebody to go through 7 people in this organization for this type of role. But if you're talking about a role that, I don't know, impacts actual human lives, perhaps it is necessary. If it's, depending on the type of role that it is, if it's impacting administration or some sort of like executive role in an administrative sort of company, you need basically a strong sense of character and to understand that this person can jibe with this organization from a point of personality and chemistry. And then the rest is technical. And if they have the prowess, then why not bring them on? That should take maybe a couple of weeks. And then, of course, the size of the organization, responsibilities, and so on also impact those kinds of processes. But it's important that everything is laid out in the open. You said something that resonated with me is you'll get through the 5 months only to find out that we're going to go in another direction. There needs to be consistent points of communication throughout that 6 months, because that's insane for anybody to be sitting around for 170 days waiting to see if you're going to get the job or not. And in the meantime, what's happening? If that same applicant is applying to other jobs and they're doing it much faster and they're going through the rounds quicker, they offer them the job faster because they find out that this person is actually valuable and they're good talent and all that. And you're going to miss out on that opportunity anyway, as the other organization. So honestly, it's not a simple straight answer because it depends on the organization, on why it exists, the experiences they're trying to create, and the values that they hold. One thing that I can say across the board, though, is that transparency goes a long way and does put people ahead of everything else to make sure that their lives are not completely disrupted while you're trying to make a decision in the background.
So what are some, I don't know if I want to say stories because some of that's kind of confidential, I'm guessing.
Mm-hmm.
What are some hurdles you've overcome, like within yourself, within your business, within, going to somebody else's business and finally getting them to like break the chains of, but we've always done it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I can talk about myself with that for sure. We always fall into, as leaders of our own lives, as it were, we fall into the traps of familiarity, as it were, right? Like we become either too comfortable or unable to see other possibilities or other options not because we're inherently against them, but just because we don't want to. It feels too risky or too unsafe, or one sentiment that I believe is across the board, you can either agree or disagree, is we become so well versed in our own ways that we're just like, there shouldn't be another way. Or moreover, this is actually one of the most common ones, is like we put in so much work into a certain thing. You put in so much time and effort and work And when it gets to a point where it's just not working and it's not succeeding in the way that you want, you just don't want to believe that all your effort was for nothing. But to say that it's for nothing is also an absolutism, and it's not to say that it was for nothing, because if you can sort of look at it from a lens of, I did everything I could to make this thing work and it still doesn't, that means you learned something from that. All that effort brought you to a point where you can literally say, okay, this is just not working in the way that I thought it would. And it's time to readjust or reevaluate. And I did this with my own processes. I did this with my own model. My signature model is called the inside, outside, in model. There was a period where that model took almost 8 months to implement, to deliver. It's a 4-phase model. Each phase took 2 months to complete, which is very long. 8 months is more than half a year. That's a long time. It's a very heavy investment. It's a heavy investment from the client, from my own team, and so on. It bogs down my pipeline on how many people we can work with at a time, and so on, and like how many people it requires to actually design this thing, and so on and so on and so on and so on. And over time, I kept readdressing it and readjusting it and reassessing it. And now it's a 4-month process, and we've increased the delivery time, we've increased the value, we've reduced the time it takes to do it, and everyone's happier for it. And as a result, internally, my team has become more efficient, our processes have become more efficient. And the way that we addressed that was to just step back and look at our own values. Again, like our own branding. What is it that we value as an organization, as a team, as a people? And are we consistently living those values? And when the answer is no, when you have those values set in stone, you can answer that question very simply. And I think anytime I've fallen into I've hit these walls even with clients and other organizations, that's why I go back to the research. I want to make sure that what they value is actually being applied across the board. And it's not this, the parents model, like you do as I say, not as I do. And like, make sure that you're living your values and that you're actually embodying them. And that when you talk about, well, this is how we've always done it, take a step back and be like, but why have you always done it like that? And you can't say, because that's the way we've always done it. You have to say, because we value X, Y, and Z, and we want people to experience A, B, and C. If you can't answer a why question with that response, then you need to reassess what you're doing.
Yeah, I don't think because I said so has ever been a valid argument.
No. Absolutely not. Ironically, even in the military, because one might say, well, that's what it's like in the military. For the military, there's no questions, you just do what you're told. But that's not even true, because they also can lean into, why do we do it like this? Because we value X, Y, and Z, and we want people to experience A, B, and C. Mm-hmm. They have a very resolute, in fact, the military is an interesting case study when it comes to branding and organization and policy and process, because they are so bound by a value system. They're so bound by a value system that they do embody it, that they do live it. Even ex-military still embodies the values that they learned and grew up with and were trained in from their time in the military. And it's something so resolute that it's so evident and felt across the board. Even if you're not in the military or even agree with the military or its ways or otherwise, have to be just very thick not to see that they are bound by a set of values. And it's not because I told you so. It's because we want to experience a certain thing and to raise a certain kind of person and to create a certain kind of person and experience. Therefore, we do it this way.
Yep. Once a Marine, always a Marine.
Yeah.
And they all eat crayons, so it's fine. Some Marines lean into that. They'll actually have the crayons in their pocket, and if they meet another Marine, they'll be like, okay, what's your favorite flavor?
Yeah. And if you ask them why they eat crayons, they'll still give you the line, because we value this and we want to experience that. Yeah, yeah.
But like the people who fight next to each other, who are always, there for each other on the ship, on the battlefield, wherever they are, they grow connections, and then when they go to the next thing, it just kind of like, oh, you're a Marine, you were in that same situations, I got you covered too. They're always reaching out and trying to help. Some people do fall through the cracks and stuff, but I was a military brat, so
Yeah.
okay. So did you have a book?
No, I'm actually working on one.
Oh, okay.
Interestingly enough. I have a
When is that
podcast.
going to be ready?
The goal is to have it published by the spring.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what is it going to be about?
It's about all this, in essence, to become a culture brand and what that means, and what steps need to be taken to even begin to accomplish that, and where it all started, where the ideal started with me, which was during COVID, and the emphasis that put on the gap between the employee and the employer relationship, the emphasis it put on self-care, how the US, as usual, pushed that notion off the cliff, and it became, in my words, selfish care, and exacerbated the individualistic mindset of this nation and this society, where it became all about me, and the notion that self-care is actually about being able to take care of yourself in order to take care of others, so that you can exist in a sort of cohesive environment and manner, so that self-care is not about individualism. In fact, it's about being in a healthy state of mind and a healthy body and a healthy capacity, so that you're available, so that you're capable, so that you're able to be a human, to be what you need to be to serve others, to serve yourself, to serve your family, and so on. And that's when the Great Resignation came about, right, in 2021, where people were leaving their work en masse. And it became this, I'm not being taken care of, what about my needs, what about my needs? And the two-sided narrative was just broken. It was lost, because it was like, okay, you're bailing on people because your needs are not being met, but you have no sense in what that's doing to the person on whom you're bailing. And that could be said for anything, any two relationships. But the positive side of that was that it shone a big bright light on the problem with leadership and management, and how management was actually acting like that. Management was like, we need you to do this, and we need you to do that, and this is what you're going to do for us, and so on and so on, and never talking about what they're going to do for their employees. And that's what emphasized this narrative, and that's what sort of prompted this whole direction that I've been taking.
Okay. You have a podcast?
I do have a podcast. Yeah. It's called Frog Talk. It's actually also about all this stuff. It's the same thing. It's about branding and the modern workplace, and talking about employee well-being and how company culture impacts a person's personal life, to the point where I've spoken with couples, like marriage counselors and such, because again, like even in our conversation just now, we barely touched on like the personal side of what all this does, what all this means. Like, what does this mean for a person's personal life? We talked about it in the job description and so on, but it's interesting to see the perspective of someone who deals with people in their personal environment, as opposed to just the organizational environment. In the organizational environment, that's what we talk about all the time. We're talking about the workspace, but we don't talk about how that impacts, like, what they take home with them when they have a crappy day at work. How does that impact the home life? Or on the other hand, if they have a great day at work, how does that impact the home life? I've heard stories of, we're putting in programs where a person's spouse, like an employee's spouse, is calling leadership and thanking them for creating such a great environment, to where, their partner is coming home feeling good, and they can actually separate home and life, or at least if it's harmonious, then that's what it is. It's a place where everyone feels like they're contributing in a positive way.
switching to the more personal side of things, I know from experience, not with corporate life, but I know that if I have a bad day while I'm sitting at this computer because everybody wanted things when they wanted them and they wanted it now. Like if I have 5 people call me and they all want this thing done right now and I'm going, well, you're going to have to wait. You're not the first in line.
Yeah.
Then I know that like I can go to my friend who I vent to and she's like, why are you yelling at me? And I'm like, I'm not yelling at you. I'm just agitated. Like, I get that part because like it's still, why do I have to do this? And like it's my own fault because it's something I agreed to do. Right?
Right.
Like, it's
Right.
my own fault in this case. But having it be somebody else, like a manager calling on your day off and saying you have to come in
Oh,
because
yeah.
you're the only one available,
Yeah.
I'm not available.
Yeah.
You know, so how do you cross that gap and make sure that people maybe are not okay per se, but like are having less of that yelling at somebody to vent off everything after they get home because things are better or at least more smooth at work than they used to be?
Yeah, sure. That's a really good question. So one of the things that we like to emphasize when we develop and design these programs is actually understanding a person's, like, the employee lifestyle. Because, for example, there's a big talk about the generation gap in the workforce. There's never been a time where there's been a larger gap between the oldest generation and the youngest generation. And to the point where they can't even communicate with each other. They don't speak the same language. But more so than that, what's more impactful in terms of how an employee behaves, their interactions and dynamics with the workplace, is lifestyle and personality. Because you could have people separated by 2 generations with the same personality and the same lifestyle. They could both have, for example, 2 single women have sort of the same social lifestyle. One might be in her 40s, the other one might be in her 20s. Or same with 2 single men. Or conversely, 2 men who have 2 kids and a partner. One is 28, the other one is 50. But there's some similarities in those 2 individuals. And so the way that we address that is by essentially setting up policies for creating boundaries and understanding what kind of personalities require what kind of environments and what kind of work settings. And remember, we're also talking about work environments that might implement hybrid, like working from home and remote style workplaces, whereas some organizations it's not even a question of allowing one or the other. It's not a work from home situation. If you're a factory worker or an assembly line worker or some sort of researcher or R&D kind of person where you have to be in a laboratory setting or factory setting or otherwise, you don't have the capacity to work from home anyway. So how do you mitigate that through a communication strategy and a communication policy that allows for, one, the ability to vent when you need to at work to the right people, to have an outlet for complaints or any sort of negative reinforcement or negative stimulation or environment or otherwise. And I can't speak to how people should behave in their home life. That's something that they need to sort of figure out, whether it's through an actual professional counselor or just through experimentation with themselves or reading books or otherwise. All I know is that, for example, if we're talking about working from home, if you live in a single bedroom apartment, you just can't, your lifestyle doesn't afford you the luxuries of having 2 bedrooms, a separate office or otherwise, and you're living inside your house with your kids and your family and your dogs and everything. Well, working in that environment for 8 hours a day, 9 hours a day sucks, no matter how you slice it. That sucks anyway. I can attest to that. And then if you have like a separate office kind of a situation in your home where you can close the doors and physically separate yourself from all the goings on in your life, or your spouse or your kids or whatever, and you set rules and you say from 9 to 12 every morning, you can't come in here. And then from 1 to 6, you can't come in here. I'll come out maybe for 15 minutes here and there, and we can spend some time together. That's on you. But as far as, and it is what it is. That's something not everyone can control, and it's just a consequence of cost of living, economic situations, or otherwise. But as far as the work life is concerned and the workplace is concerned, we're very much about understanding who the employees are, what kind of personalities they have, what kind of lifestyles they have, what kind of home life they have, so that we can, in fact, create a work environment that accommodates those parameters while ensuring that they have enough ownership and to create the motivation and the visibility that they require in order to do the best work that they can. So that when they go home, they're not carrying a whole bunch of stress and load and whatever weight on their back from the workday, that they can actually disconnect.
Talking about corporate life, I have trouble with, because, like I said, I've never been in corporate life. I mean, I guess the closest I came to that is working for Walmart, and that didn't go well.
Yeah.
But the big thing, one of the bigger things that I have heard is employees don't leave jobs, they leave managers.
Yeah.
How do you have any things that you do to try to check the management for being that kind of a person, that somebody is fleeing the job for that person, because of that person, and like maybe training or something to help new managers to be able to figure out this stuff?
100%. Absolutely. So before I speak on that, even if you're working for yourself as a freelancer, the most important thing, honestly, is boundaries and being able to manage your time, right? Like, this, because time management, one, is huge. Like, years ago, so I came up in sort of corporate, as it were. And so I learned about we had a 10 to 6 work day, actually. It was kind of the best hours ever. But it was 10 to 6. There was even times when I took on more roles, not for more pay. I was just given more roles. And I was working 12-hour days for a while, like from 7 to 7. And even though the work day started at 10, I was there 3 hours before everybody, and I left an hour after everyone else, that kind of a thing. And that didn't last very long, to the point where I put my foot down and I went straight to the top. I went to the CEO and the owner of the company, and I was like, this is not sustainable. This is stupid. Like, you guys, you need to hire people for these other roles. I can't sustain this. It's not, I'm going to burn out so fast. It's been 4 months and this is already crazy. And I was working every other Saturday as well, because of the various departments I was running. As an individual, as an independent, it's important to be able to set those boundaries. And now, even as a business owner today, running a company, I still work 60 hours a week on average, but I'm giving myself cutoffs. So I work from 8 in the morning till 6 p.m. and then from Sunday through Friday. And Saturday I don't work. And this is something that I've made a rule around this. And I've told my team, I've told my clients, I say, I am offline from 6 p.m. until 8 a.m. every day. So if you hit me up in the middle of the night, I'm not going to get back to you. And to the point where, until the next morning, I will get back to you first thing in the morning, but you have to wait at least 10 hours. And then my company is run the same way. So we'll say, and it's because of for the well-being of my team. I'm like, we're not a 24-hour agency here. I'm not going to tell my people to be available 24 hours a day. You have open access to us, but our response time is within the windows of when we're available, which is either 10 hours a day. Which is 10 hours a day. So that's it. And as far as training managers, absolutely. The programs that we put in place are with the intention of ensuring that they're putting together a culture of retention, a culture that's desirable, an environment that people want to be a part of, answering that original question, why would anyone want to work here? And by instilling those programs and processes and dynamics, we'll bring in, because Black Ribbit ourselves, we don't employ coaches, but our extended network and our team is connected to executive coaches, personal coaches, leadership coaches, and otherwise, who come in when it's suitable to implement the program that we put together. And as you know, every coach is not suitable for every environment. When we put in a certain kind of program to cultivate a certain kind of culture, then we bring in the suitable coach that possesses that mindset and embodies that type of leadership, who can very easily manage or coach those managers to shift their mindset and start embodying those values. Because, and I think you and I talked about this last time, but those changes come from the top. It's a top down approach. If leadership doesn't embody, what we were saying earlier, you do what I say, no, not as I do. If the leadership is not embodying the values they're trying to instill, then nothing's going to happen anyway. There won't be any change.
I know that you, either today or when we discussed before, said that you had some problems. Obviously, you filled out 460 something.
Yeah.
So, how did you overcome being turned down or ignored that much? Because I know I get ignored for 5 minutes and I'm going to go claw somebody up. Not really. I don't. But where I'm like, okay, now you have to pay attention to me because I'm right here and you're going to pay attention to me.
Yeah.
So,
God, Nikki, that is such a good question. I can't even like pinpoint a moment or a turning point or something, because it was a period where I honestly just felt like I felt psychotic. I just felt crazy. It felt, talk about feeling invisible. And then as a human, I need feedback. We as humans need feedback, adjust, to change, to react, and so on. As a designer, I require it. Like, I go absolutely nuts when I don't have, like, I don't know what to do here. I'm going to just keep doing what I'm doing until there's something breaks that pattern. And I go, oh, okay, this is what I should be doing instead. And it's just, because otherwise I'm like, as my strategist and designer brain is like, there's no reason to change until there's a reason to change. So unless I have that reason, I'm going to keep doing it the way that I'm doing it. And people are going, why don't you do it this way or do it that way or try that? I'm like, why? And they're like, I can't give you a reason. I'm like, then I'm not going to try it. So when it came to looking for jobs, it was the same thing. And I'm going, well, do I change my CV? Do I change my resume? Do I change any of this? I don't know. Why would I change it? I'm not getting any feedback. I don't know if it's good or bad or whatever, to the point where recruiters were like, no, your resume is awesome. It's so perfect and blah, blah, blah. Your history is great. And you have all this experience and you have a degree and blah, da, 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 da. And I'm like, clearly it's not perfect, because I don't know what perfect means in your world, but perfect in my world means at least I get a response. So getting over that, man, was not, I don't think it was like an active thing. I think it was just just persisting, just doing what I was doing, trying to get feedback from other people, like friends and colleagues. One of my friends, like you were saying, like, he really came through for me. He was just there for me, and he's a professional, so he had a lot of useful feedback. It didn't help me get a job, but at least it helped me feel sane and feel seen, at least. And then eventually, you know what I did actually? I got off the computer. I went outside and I actually started networking in the old school way. Like, I went in, I joined a couple groups. Some friends here in Houston hit me up and invited me to their networking groups. And I started meeting people. Getting feedback in the field really helped me out. Just like interacting. I mean, it was 2021, so it was still kind of early after COVID, and people were just shaking off the cobwebs, but that really helped. Just being out there. I mean, I think as people, whether we're introverts or otherwise, there comes a time when, if you're around like-minded people, you miss it when you haven't had it in a long time. If there are people that you can connect with and you can talk to in the same language, with the same themes and values, you're like, man, I've been in front of this screen for too long. I need to get out. And you don't even realize it because you become so encompassed in it and wrapped up in it that you don't even realize it until you're out there and you're like, oh my God, there's this whole other world out here that I forgot about. And ironically, when you're interacting with 12 people, you sometimes get more value than trying to interact with 10,000 strangers. I don't know if that answered your question, but it was like, it certainly wasn't one moment in time. It was a process of things.
So for me, I had a big turning point in my
Mhm.
mental health because I went from not being able, like, I broke. I had something big happen. I
Mhm.
can honestly say I broke. My brain went into 1,000 pieces, and somebody would ask, look, I know tech, right? Like, I can get on a computer, I can do all the things.
Mhm.
I can do a lot of different things. I can't code. Don't ask me to
Mhm.
do that. But I can slap together a computer faster than you know, and I can
Wow.
do things on the computer without it being a problem. And so I had somebody give me tasks to do because he couldn't do it. And so I would get this task, and it basically was get the contacts out of Google. Yeah, okay, this is going to take 17 years and a day because, like, I was getting overwhelmed by just thinking about doing it.
Mhm.
And so it took forever to do things. And then I finally moved to a situation where things weren't happening. They shouldn't have been happening in the first place. And things just kind of calmed down. And once things were calm, my brain kind of switched on, like somebody
Mhm.
finally hit the light switch. And I was just kind of like, oh, okay. Like, it didn't fix anything. That's not when everything was fixed, but it
Yeah.
switched back on. And I went from not being able to do anything to now I need to do everything so that I'm not stuck back in that black void of my brain. Because
Right. Right.
I don't want to be in that. And I started working for that person who had been giving me the little tasks, and slowly, bit by bit, I was able to do more and more and more and faster. And, you know,
Yeah.
pretty soon I was like, hey, I'm an actual worker bee. And so that's kind of how I started out, because it was just, yeah, I can do that. Sure. I'll
Yeah.
go figure out how to actually do it now. And for me, the only times I have ever not wanted to work with somebody is when they started yelling.
Yeah. Sure.
I don't like being yelled at. It's just this thing. And most of the time, at least from what I've seen, the person yelling is yelling because they haven't listened to what you've said.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because,
That's a
like, if
good
they let
observation.
you finish your sentence, everything would be explained, and that 20-minute tantrum didn't need to happen. And I am really not the person to 20-minute tantrum at, because I'm just sitting there going, okay, baby,
Yeah.
are you going to shut up yet? Wah, wah, wah.
And that's when
Not
you
saying,
stop listening. You're like, well, I'm not
yeah, I'm
hearing
not
anything you're
even
saying at this
participating
point.
in
Yeah.
this. Because, like,
Yeah.
every once in a while I'll throw in a, you're not listening to me,
Yeah. Absolutely.
because they're not listening.
When did you start working for yourself then? How long ago was
It's
that?
been, I've always worked for, well, not always, but since I got my brain back, I work for myself.
Right.
And I'll tell people, that's what I say. When I got my brain back, I started actually working for myself, because yes, I was working for that one person, but then it turned into his company, and another company. And then that one big company went away, and, you know, I started okay,
Yeah.
well, now I need to network, because now I need other people to work for. And so that kind of started that whole thing for me, because I'm not used to networking. My
Yeah.
original person, I still work with him, and he is great at word of mouth. And he will literally be like, hey, Nikki, I heard from this person that they need XYZ. I told him that he could call you and you'd do it. Thanks. Maybe. Did you say that he would pay me? And sometimes he's like, no, this is a church friend, so it's free. But other times he's like, oh no, I told them that they'd have to pay you, that you'd have to
Yeah.
work that out with them. I'm like, great. Thanks.
Yeah.
And
Don't
different,
refer my free services, please.
had that conversation.
Yeah.
He hasn't done that since then. Because I was like, after the third free person, I was like, Dave,
Yeah.
are you going to start paying me extra every time somebody like this comes along? And he's like, wait, what? And I'm like, I can't keep working for free, my dude. And he was like, oh, that makes sense. Thank
Bless his heart.
But like, there's that big difference between customer, like clients, or I never know what to call people. I'm like, yeah, my customer client. It's fine. It's the person who pays me to do what I do. It's fine. Whatever.
Mike, it's a customer.
It's a customer. Yep. Because like some people are like, well, if they're a customer, then they're always right. And I'm like, no, my people know that they are not always right. Because I will tell them, wait, what did you just say?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I have that freedom. I am very grateful to have that freedom, right?
Yeah.
Because
Absolutely.
I wouldn't like I did work in it was called Roy Rogers. It was like a McDonald's type thing, but it
Mhm.
was all like rodeo themed.
Oh,
I don't
okay.
even know if it's still there. I have no idea. But you have a customer that comes up, they feel entitled
Yeah.
for you to act a certain way, and they're going to act as trashy as possible. I don't handle people like that. I don't want to. The people
Yeah.
I work with are people that I feel I can talk to, and like we both understand where we're
Sure.
at in things.
Yeah. Not to mention I mean, look, at the end of the day, if you're offering a service-oriented gig, that's your name on the line too. At the end of the day, if you're just because the client wants something and they think they're right, and you know better because you're the expert and they hired an expert, I think we as experts should do everything in our power to make sure that the output is the way that we believe is best for the client, because that's going to be a better outcome for them, which will be a better outcome for us. And that's the argument that I think is often lost. And because your reputation is on the line. If you deliver poor work because someone told you to do that and you just didn't want to argue or whatever, then that's going to fall on you anyway. They're going to get pissed at you. They're going to say they wasted a bunch of money. And you know this as well as I do. Our industry does not have a good reputation, and there's a lot of accountability, self accountability that needs to be taken there. But it's two sides of the same coin. I do my best to make sure that my industry, the branding and communications and marketing industry, does not have another stain on its back because I wasn't able to deliver properly, or I was dishonest, or I wasn't transparent enough.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a hard pill to swallow sometimes, because we want the money, or you need the money, or whatever. And you have to be like, you know what, this isn't going to work out, because if we go about it this way, then I won't be able to deliver what I need to deliver in order for you to succeed. And you're going to think it was my fault. And I'd rather just tell you to wait, or do it later when you can afford it, or send you somewhere that's going to take better care of you.
The big thing for me is I don't do things how people expect them to be done. I do them the right way.
Yeah.
And while the right way for me is my right way I don't really think of me having a reputation. I'm not that big. I don't have that big of a head, like whatever. But it's more my values, because I'm not going to be lying to anybody. I'm not going to be saying I did one thing and do another. It's not that kind of a thing. But like if somebody says, well, you have to take step 1, 2, 3, and I'm like, no, I don't. I know to get this project done the way I'm being asked to do it, I need to do it A, B, C.
Yeah.
And that will get the thing that they actually want and not what they think they want. And so I'll kind of go do that, but not in a way that is sneaky or underhanded. I'm just going, okay, so this is what you're saying, but this is what the contract says. This is what the contract says you wanted. And now you're doing this. Like, I've had those conversations. The thing for me is I, after experience, can now tell the type of person I want to work with.
Sure.
So you have the people you can. I'm not saying you have to be buddy with everybody you work with, although I do tend
quite
to
the
create.
opposite.
Like I do tend to create friendships with some of the people I'm working with, because I go into like every bit of their business. Like my hands are in all the pies.
Yeah.
Right? just because I work with people who are smaller businesses and they need that kind of a thing. I'm not working for a corporation where my fingers being in all the pies would cause legal problems.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that dynamic does change and shift with the size of the company, especially, if you're working that to say that you don't have a reputation, in my opinion, is just false because you do with those people. You have a reputation with those people. It doesn't mean you're world famous necessarily. It just means that, there is a network of people that know who you are. And if it ever came down to you starting to burn bridges with any of them, that would get around.
Yeah.
And that would affect you as a person and your business. And the dynamic absolutely does shift between different sized companies. I personally, I like to work with the business owner, the business founder, even if it's a bigger company. I want to make sure that I'm working with the leadership team because I can't do what I'm trying to do with this whole culture branding application if I'm not talking to leadership, because the buck will stop at whoever I'm working with. And then that thing that I'm talking about with putting a stain on our industry, that's when that happens because leadership won't adopt the program that I took all this time to build with the person that I'm building it with on their side. And I'm going, but it's your responsibility to make sure you get buy-in from the people up top. Have you done that yet? They should be part of this whole process. And that's happened. I've worked with clients where that didn't happen. And then what happens? The program that I deliver doesn't get bought in. It doesn't get adopted. It doesn't get applied. They start Frankensteining it with like old models and old stuff. And now nothing looks, and now everything is broken. Now there's no purpose whatsoever. I say you should have just stuck with I always say it's like buying a new suit and not wearing it, or like deciding to just wear the coat for a year. And then after a year, you're like, wait, didn't this come with a set of pants? And you go grab the set of pants and now they don't match anymore. And I'm like, you should have just stuck with the old suit. At least it matched and people knew what the hell you were trying to do. Now it's you've got this mismatched suit, which half of it looks worn in and the other half looks brand new and nobody knows what you're trying to do.
That's a very interesting way to describe that. So, kind of along that, I have also figured out who I don't want to work with.
Yeah.
Right? There are some personalities that, like, I can catch it at the beginning when I'm first talking to them. And they'll be like, oh, well, I'm going to do this, this, and this. And you're going to do that, that, that. So I started working with somebody. And right at the beginning, it was, well, you're going to be learning how to do everything the first month or two. So I'm going to pay you less for the first month or two.
Oh,
and I'm
what?
like,
that's not a thing.
no, it's actually usually the opposite. Usually you pay more for the first couple of months. Like, what are you talking about? And then, like, the things I do, like, I don't want to be attached to only one company. I don't want to just work for one person.
Yeah.
I would get bored to tears. And there wouldn't be enough, in my mind anyway, for me to do that is different that would make it so that I wouldn't start, like, oh, I'm not doing that. That's boring.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but he kept saying, oh, well, eventually you'll just have to drop some of your old clients and just start working for me. And I'm just sitting there going, no, that's not how this is going to work. And then he asked me my opinion on something, which a lot of people do stupidly. Because if you ask me my opinion,
I'm going to tell it to you.
Please do not think that I am going to sweeten it up with sugar, because I am not. I'm not mean, or at least I don't try to be mean, but I can be pretty blunt when it's not meant in a mean way or any of that. I'm not that person like, yeah, I'm just a little bit blunt. Oh, your face is weird. Like, that's not blunt, that's rude.
Yeah.
There's a difference. But he asked me my opinion on something, and I got at first, honestly, I thought it was stupid. Because 90% of the time when somebody wants me to start doing something brand new, I am looking at it like, oh, this is going to be stupid. I don't even want to do this. This is not going to be helpful at all. Especially because everything sounds weird when you're first hearing about it, right? Like you first hear about the Bible and you're going, that's a weird book. A lot of weird things happen in there. But at the same time, there's like good things that happen in there. You got to find them, but they're there. And so I was like, but, and then he starts yelling. You're not listening.
Yeah.
You didn't let me finish. You're not listening. Like,
Right.
don't yell at me.
Well, the thing that sorry, go ahead.
So finally he stops yelling. Okay, go ahead. And I finished it off and he was like, oh. Listen to me. Know that I am strange. But gee, just let me finish what I'm saying before you try to like climb down my throat.
The thing with hearing, it's funny what you said about hearing new things. It's if if someone's telling you something you've never heard before, then that person needs to be open to whatever you're going to respond with. That's sort of the point, right? If it's new information, then it's going to be followed up with either, oh, I totally get it, or I have a bunch of questions. And it's one or the other. It's never one thing. It's either this or it's either that. Sometimes that's why if you say something that's totally outlandish to someone and they're like, oh my God, I totally get it, that's a really good feeling. Because you're like, oh my, what, the thing I came up with landed. That's awesome. On the other hand, you might say something totally outlandish to somebody that they've never heard of before. And they'll go, okay, but what about this? Or what about that? Or I don't agree with this, or I don't agree with that. And you have to be ready for that. And that doesn't mean anything. All that means is that they need clarification, or they want to talk about it. They don't understand it and they want to understand it. And if they don't agree and just walk away, then you don't need to be interacting with that person anyway.
So, I mean, that's like somebody saying, oh, there's this new thing I heard. It's I before E except after C. And I'm like, okay, that sounds weird. But what about neighbor? Oh, well, that's an exception. How many of those are there? And then they do that whole paragraph thing, and you're going, I'm not using that. Screw off.
Yeah. Yeah. Then you go down the rabbit hole of the English language.
It's really interesting, really quick.
Like, why is the past tense of seek sought?
What should you really call more than one octopus? Because there are words that some people say that end up sounding very not safe for work.
No, I know. The plural of octopus is actually cacti.
I use the safe for octopi instead of the other one. But
I do too, actually.
It's just like the English language is a whole that's a whole lecture. Like, holy cow, it gets me sometimes. But there's words like read, read, all that. They spelt exactly the same way. But like if you've spoken English enough and you're reading it, you know which way to pronounce it when you're reading it.
Because of the that's when I say context is literally everything. Without context, nothing has meaning. But then like lead and lead, to lead, to have lead, or to chew on lead. There's two different things.
Well, there's lead. It's a metal. You have your lead.
Yeah, there's lead as a metal, and then to have lead. Yeah, to have led people. I led so and so, down the stream. Yeah, it's a crazy. On the other hand, it's also one of the most forgiving languages. That's why if you're learning English, you can already start communicating. because it doesn't, you don't have to speak it perfectly. In fact, you can speak it quite imperfectly. You can put words pretty much anywhere in a sentence, in any shape or in any order, and people will still understand what you're saying. That's why it's
Well,
a
it might
perfect.
take a second.
It might take a second, but if, like I, for example, I grew up internationally. I have an ear for, thick accents and broken languages and so on, and I can quickly understand what people are saying in broken English. But other languages, French, German, actually Persian is quite forgiving as well. But there are many like Spanish. It's, if you're not speaking it correctly, people don't know what the hell you're saying. And that's why English is like the perfect language, especially American English is perfect for marketing. You'll find it in European languages. The French use English in their marketing, the Germans use English in their marketing because it's forgiving and it's punchy and you can cut it up and crop it and do all kinds of things with it. Grammatically and correctly, it's a very weird, confusing language.
The guy I game with, right? When I first started playing Sea of Thieves with him, which is a game where you are a pirate, obviously, Sea of Thieves, and you have your own ship and you go sail around to different islands and do different things, right? Well, he was trying to teach me how to lunge, but he kept calling it luge. And when he was first talking about it, I was like, wait, what did you just say? Because he's Panamanian, so his first language is Spanish. But he learned English right beside it when he was young, so he does not have the usual accent. I was like, I really just have an aneurysm? What did you say? He's like, it's the luge. I'm like, no, luge is like a winter sport. I don't think you know what winter is, so I don't think you know what that is. But this is not that. And it took me a while, and I taught, I mean, and not in a condescending way, but like he'd go to say lunge, and he'd say luge. Like, no, remember lunge.
Yeah, right.
Like, oh, yeah. And then he'd say it, and like he was actively learning it. It wasn't like that. And now every once in a while, I'll mess up the word because
that's awesome.
That's me. And he's like, I did not take that much time to learn that word just for you to start screwing it up.
That's good. That's a sweet interaction. Yeah, language is a whole other thing. I prefer it if people corrected me instead of telling me that it's funny the way that I say it. Like when I was learning German, for example, when I was in Germany and trying to speak German, people would they'd either be like, specifically women more so than men, but they were like, it's so cute the way you pronounce that, or that's so funny. I'm like, that's not helpful. Like, tell me how to actually say it. Or if you understand what I'm saying, just respond back in German. And then, I would lean into like, I could stand here all day and make fun of your English. I'm actually, one, either just responding to you in English or correcting you. And to your point, not in a way that's trying to be mean. I want you to speak correctly so that you feel good about your language, so that you can communicate. Language is a thing I'm very sensitive with. It's one of the things that people are super sensitive with. Don't make fun of someone trying to speak another language. It's fucking hard. It's really difficult.
No. When I was in middle school, I didn't want to have to take home ec. I didn't want to bake anything. I didn't want to take art because screw that. Can't draw. My stick figures look anorexic. What do you want me to do? I did not want to take shop. I mean, and I'm aging myself because I don't think shop is even a thing anymore.
Right. I don't think it's a
but like I'm in my early 40s. Like this is not like I'm 110. I'm not 50s, 60s, or whatever. I'm early 40s. I was born in 81, okay? But my middle school still had the thing where you had to like build a birdhouse or whatever. And I was not interested. Right. Super terrified of the table saw was going to take my fingers off. No, thank you very much. So I had to get special permission, and I started taking French. I took French for 2 years. 2 years I took French. I'm guaranteed I got by with a C both years. But the big thing for me it was hard trying to figure out French. But like I can, if I come across, some writing, I can kind of go, oh, that's French. That's Spanish, because my teacher taught both. And so sometimes we'd come in the room and we'd understand some of the words on the board because French and Spanish have similar words.
They're similar.
Like, just like there's some words that if you say them in English, everybody around the world can understand, like emergency or something like that.
Right.
But so that's perfectly fine. But we come in and we'd notice every once in a while that there were words that were similar. Like none of the words connecting it made sense.
Right.
And that's because it wasn't French, it was Spanish. So we were just kind of like, and so, we had that conversation.
Yeah.
Languages can be just slightly different and be completely different
Sure.
to the people who have them. But I don't remember jack from that course. I remember de trois.
Yeah.
Like, I can do some of those numbers, but not all of them. Like, bonjour.
Yeah.
Let's butcher up some French with English accents type thing.
Yeah, that's
But, like,
something. Yeah.
It's
Sorry, go
very
ahead.
hard. It's very, very hard to learn another language. And so I am super impressed by anybody who knows more than one language, because I
Yeah.
couldn't do it. So I'm super impressed. But the big thing for me, and why I correct people when they're speaking a language that may not be their first or it may not be their fifth, but it's coming from a place where if I'm speaking English and somebody corrects my word, I'm like, oh yeah, thank God, that's the word I was looking for, right? And so I want to make sure they have that. Also, I have this thing where I don't like to feel stupid.
Yeah.
And when I first started reading, I was at a first grade reading level in sixth grade. And I got into reading. I had that dictionary next to my book because I didn't know what none of them words meant. But it's a process. But the big thing for me was people would sometimes correct my words when I went to say something. And I had learned that word from what I was reading, so I didn't have a problem with it. But I thought arrogant was arrogant for some reason.
Okay.
Like,
Yeah.
like it was there. I said it like that for years.
And no one
Years.
corrected you. Yeah.
Nobody corrected me. They all just kind of looked at me like I was saying something weird, but I didn't catch it. And eventually I had to do an IQ test, and that word was one of them. And the guy was like, oh, so do you know what this word means? And I was like, yeah. And I told him the meaning of the word. And he goes, okay, can you pronounce it? And I was like, sure. And I said it. And he goes, wait, how did you pronounce that? And I said it again. And he went, just so you know, it's arrogant. And I went, oh, you sound kind of arrogant, but okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And,
You're
'cause
like,
he
I
wasn't
know the
doing it,
meaning. Yeah, right. What
he
a
wasn't doing it from a place of, I want to help you. It was,
Yeah.
you sound like an idiot.
trip.
Here's the word. And I'm like, and then after you learn that, like, for years you've said this to people and they've just kind of went like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
That doesn't give you that all good of a feeling, because now all them people think you're a moron when it was just you learned that word from a book, not from actually speaking to people
Yeah.
who used it.
Yeah. Absolutely. I get annoyed with the accent thing too. When people are like, "Oh, he's not saying it right because it's supposed to be pronounced this way." Arrogant is not an accent thing. That's straight up mispronouncing the word.
Yeah.
But like when the French get all arrogant about that's not how you say that. I'm like, do you understand what he's saying? And they go, yeah, perfectly. I'm like, then that's how you say that. Don't worry about the accent, dude. Like everybody has. I get people are like, I don't have an accent. I'm like, everybody has an accent. Everybody, literally every human on the planet has an accent. And for you to say I don't have an accent just means you've never left the vicinity of your home, like where you grew up. And to like to be, it's like such a weird thing to say I don't have an accent. Like, yeah, you do. You have the accent of where you came from. That's what that accent is.
So I have a kind of neutral accent, I'm guessing. because I grew up all over the US. So I speak English in a way that tells you that I've spoken it my entire life, but I'm
Yeah,
not Southern. I say some Southern words because I did live in parts of it for a while,
yeah.
but I grew up all over the place. Like when I moved from Boston to Maryland, I got picked on because of my Boston accent
Mm.
because I could park my car and have a yard and it was fine. But now I moved to Maryland and all of a sudden, oh, that's no
Yeah,
good. You sound funny.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so
And I
I
mean,
got rid of it.
in the global sense, you have an American accent. That's what you have. Within the U.S., I think neutral is a good word because, like, even me, I have a muddled accent. I
Yeah.
have like, I'll even pronounce the same word in different ways. Sometimes I'll say water, other times I'll say water if I'm speaking too fast or whatever. And like it's just how it comes out of my face, and it just depends. Like comfortable is an interesting word because some people say comfortable, some people say comfortable, and then I say comfortable. And
Mhm.
like there was a period when I used to say comfortable, and then I got made fun of for that. And like I had a girlfriend who would laugh at me every time I said it, and then I started hearing it, and I would start laughing, and I'm like, what is comfortable? Where does that even come from? And I realized it was an East Coast thing.
Mhm.
And then I started just shifting it. So now I say comfortable.
Mhm.
And but then sometimes I'll say comfortable.
Mhm.
And but at the end of the day, it's a somewhat American accent. If I travel outside of the US, everyone's like, okay, you're American. But in the US, sometimes people are like, where are you from? Your accent's interesting. I'm like, yeah, well, that's interesting, but okay, whatever.
So I say aunt
Anyway, yeah,
instead of aunt
I say and.
because
Yeah.
I was raised by somebody whose opinion was aunt is your relative, aunt is a bug. You are
Yeah,
not calling my
right,
sister a bug. So
right,
you're gonna call her your aunt.
right. Yeah, I say and. I don't know why either. Like I don't know why. I think it's something I learned growing up and it just stuck.
A lot of
Like,
people do. Every once in a while, I'll come across somebody on YouTube who, when they're speaking, they say aunt. Most people say aunt. And I'm just like, they're not a bug. Stop.
yeah, it's interesting. I think giving again going back to just learning languages. For me, I'm just very sensitive to it and like giving people the space and confidence to just try to speak it is huge because it's a confidence thing. Even when you're learning it, you like speak it in class and then you don't speak it in context unless you have the guts to do it, unless you're like an extroverted sort of gutsy person. But many people will only keep it to themselves and keep it in class and they won't speak it outside because they're nervous. And I think as the recipient, there are some cultures who deeply appreciate that you're trying and they'll help you through it. They're like, I love that you're trying to speak my language. It's respectful. I have a French friend who refuses to speak to me in English. And I love that. Like and I'll sometimes speak to him in English if I can't find my words because I'm basically fluent, but I just don't speak it enough. So it goes and comes and goes. And then, so I'll sometimes speak to him in English and he'll just respond in French. And so he'll just keep speaking to me in French and he keeps pushing me to speak in French. I even had another friend who we had an agreement where I would only speak in French and he would only speak in English because he was trying to improve his English, and I was trying to improve my French. So I was like, I only speak French and you only speak English. And he was like, great. And then people would watch us talk to each other. And he's speaking in English and I'm speaking in French. It was really fun.
That's wild conversation.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have any final thoughts?
No, this was actually really fun. I had a good time with you. Thank you. No, I don't have any final thoughts.